Cool, awesome. We've got some people jumping in here. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lilia from Territory 3, and today we've got Emily Blythe joining us from Christchurch, and her startup is called Pyper Vision, which is all about helping to disperse fog from airports. So welcome, Emily, and we'd love if you could do a little bit of a background first on your history. Young enterprise venture up, I know, is something that I was in at the same time as you. So we'd love to hear, what you've been up to over the years and how you got to where you are today.
Awesome, thanks, Lilia, and hello. See some names in there that I know. So I was fortunate enough in our last year of high school to participate in the Young Enterprise Scheme. I can still vividly remember our economics teacher at the time coming into class and telling us that we weren't allowed to go into market with a CD or anything that's sort of off the shelf or a cosmetic product. We had to kind of come to market solving a big real world problem. And at the time I was learning how to fly. My mum's air traffic control, my dad's a pilot, and fog disruptions was something that was sort of a common dining room table conversation for each of us. And so I remember coming into class one day and pitching that as an idea, and back then getting told that might be a little bit too big for a 16-year-old to take on. And so we actually ended up pivoting a wee bit and going into the agricultural sector instead, with Flatpack. And I think you'll remember Flatpack, Lilia.
Yeah, that was awesome.
We had Flatpack kind of started up because that same economics teacher came into school one morning. He'd lost tools off his quad bike. He'd run over them in the harvester and broken that piece of machinery. And it had cost him a lot of money. And so we went, oh, well, here's a problem. Let's create a toolbox to put those tools in, help them with transporting around the farm off the back of the quad bike, and at the same time we'll help balance the quad bike out by putting the weight where they were designed to carry it, which is on the back. And so I guess the first, would have been 4 years coming out of high school, I ran Flatpack. We developed this bag, we sold it across 84 stores here in New Zealand. In our third year of that was when you and I met through Venture Up, which was an accelerated program.
For anyone who wasn't aware, that was a accelerated program for people who had taken part in the Young Enterprise Scheme. How many were, like, somewhere between 20 and 30 of us, all put in the same room, pitch an idea, start a team, start a business, and see where you end up after 6 weeks. And I know you always stood out to me as someone who was really, like, you knew what you were doing, you were really onto it. So it makes sense to see you've excelled since. So awesome watching your story happen.
Oh, thank you. That was like a real, I still just remember listening to entrepreneurs come in and speak every day about their life stories and kind of going, well, that's exactly what I want to do. And I do remember Mum not being super pleased after the end of it, because I quit university after just 6 months and moved myself up into Wellington and started full-time in Flatpack. So
big decisions were made after venture up. It was quite hectic.
I know, it's a good time.
Cool. And then how long did you, because I know you've obviously closed down Flatpack, how long were you still involved in that for, and what made you decide to shut it down?
So we ran Flatpack for 2 more years after Venture Up. Ultimately we shut it down for a few different reasons. One, the product was only really suitable to a New Zealand market. So quad bikes were designed originally for the US for hunting, for using 3 to 5 times a year on flat land and carrying a dead pig or whatnot on the back of it. Here in New Zealand we use them every day up and down hills, and so the idea of transporting tools daily and putting that weight on the back was only really relevant for this market. And then that was kind of crossed with, in order to get our cost of goods down, we had to increase our number of units significantly, and we just didn't have that size of market here. So ultimately ended up leaving that and deciding we had enough confidence to kickstart Pyper Vision instead.
Awesome. And how did you kick that off? Was it just the idea just came to you one day, or you'd been talking to it with others for a while, or and yeah, curious how that did
so that was going back to that was early, I guess, young enterprise days when we'd, been thinking about fog as a problem and wanting to solve it, being told then that it was too much for a 16-year-old to take on. Feeling like we had a bit more confidence now, and then also just seeing the problem like again and again. Like, I don't know about you, but I've had several of my flights delayed by fog, and was seeing a huge change as well, and like the autonomous market coming in and the need for visibility in order to integrate them safely into airspace too. So
yeah, for sure, definitely a big need there. I've had my fair share of flights cancelled. I know you're based in Christchurch, and you get a lot of fog there. It seems to be a regular issue. So great spot for you to be kicking that off. But whereabouts do you do your testing? Because it wasn't in Christchurch Airport, was it? It was somewhere else.
No, so the first 2 years we started for our outdoor trials. Once we got onto the drone, we actually ended up testing in Australia, and that's just because the Australian regulatory market at the time was a little bit further ahead of New Zealand, so we had to go and get an approval for flying in non-visual conditions, which is something no one had done before, and CASA were really good at working with us. And then COVID helped because we got our team trapped over there, so we just continued on whilst we were there.
Oh, it's an odd benefit, but
yeah,
it works. And so in terms of your team, what does your team look like, and what kind of growth have you seen there?
Yeah, so we've got a team of 5 at the moment. Really fortunate. So our very first employee was a guy called Nick Jackson, and the two of us met through Canterbury University, and he came on as one of our final year students. And so like Nick's an ultra marathon runner in his own spare time, and you just see this like mandate anything he does that, mind over matter, and you can always do one more lap, or anything is possible. And I guess bringing that sort of mindset onto a business like ours has been an absolute game changer. He sat there, gone through over 100 prior trials of systems that were tested to disperse fog, found a way through, developed a chemical compound that's efficient but also degrades quickly on the ground. And so yeah, he's been with me since almost day one. And then also on our team we've got a data scientist, a Tara Near, and I get a sideways look every time I say we've got a data scientist on our team, but actually she's been fundamental in our business and our change. And one of the things that she's built up is a database globally of what airports have fog delays, and then also going further and how much each of the airlines at those airports lose. And if you can go into an airline now and tell them that they're losing millions of dollars every year from fog disruptions alone, it's one key way to get someone's attention. And it's been awesome.
Cool. And then you 3 other team members?
Yeah, so we've also got Tyler on our team. He's our business ops manager. He's kind of my other half, sits behind the scenes, make sure all the bills are paid on time. He's brought in over 500,000 of grant funding for us, keeps our insurances intact and the team on task. And then our newest hire is Nikki Whitaker, and she comes with over 30 years experience in air traffic control and working as an advisor to Emirates Airlines. And she's come in to kind of manage our drone operations and the expansion and training of that team. So yeah, really cool team.
Nice. And in terms of raising funds, have you raised funds? Are you looking to raise funds? What's your situation there?
Yeah, so when we first started out, we did a family and friends raise, which was just kind of small, paid for the initial R&D and work with Canterbury University and Callaghan. And then since then, we've done 2 other investment rounds. We did one angel round in 2018, and then a second round in 2020. And we've just kickstarted our Series A. So at the moment, we're raising 5 mil, which will fund fund delivery to our first customer here in New Zealand, which is really exciting to see the product up and running. And then it's also going to fund sort of that start of the certification process overseas. So get our roots down. We're going for 4 major continents. So US, Europe, UK, and Canada.
Awesome. Wow, that'll be some great growth to see. Hopefully that ground gets closed really well. Awesome. Okay. And in terms of the current market out there, is there anything else like this, or is anyone trying to solve this issue? Like competitors?
Yeah. So I guess there's 2 different groups here. Our closest competitor in the market today is Autoland Systems, so your likes of CATS 3 ILS. The way they work is they have technology embedded in certain aircraft and in the airport itself, which kind of like guides an aircraft to the ground without the pilots having to touch the controls. But these systems are super expensive. You're looking upwards of 40 million for an installation. The amount of work on the runway, takes an airport over 10 years to get set up. And then it's limited to just the planes with the technology and the pilots trained. And at best, you're looking at, 50% of an aerodrome operating because of just the need for increased separation for safety reasons between aircraft. And then the other one it's not in market yet, but we're watching it quite actively, is the development of like sensor technology. So you'll see on, whether it's road or air transport, for the autonomous systems, everyone's leaning in pretty heavily on, multitude of different sensors, whether it's infrared or, vision-based sensors or whatnot to direct traffic. And some of those sensors on their own have the ability to kind of see through the fog to an extent. But what we're learning there is that they have to be programmed depending on the conditions. So if you wanted to drive and you wanted to see a car 200 meters in front of you, you've got to be able to program into the sensor that you want to see exactly 200 meters in front of you, and the density of fog and the pollutants in the air is this. So, it works for the likes of a military helicopter at the moment. But, for an aircraft, you're moving too fast. And then to maintain it over a large period of area, you'd rely on every type of transport having that sensor technology on board for it to work, and same with air traffic control. And so we're really just wanting to be able to give that confidence back to the pilot or the person behind the wheel to operate safely and efficiently.
So your solution, do you want to quickly run us through that? Is that exactly how it happens? Because it's at the airport itself, right? And so you're sending drones up. Is that how you do it?
Yes. Yeah, so we just use one drone to clear a foggy day. At the moment, we're targeting the aviation market. So the drone itself is an off-the-shelf drone. At the moment, we're using the T20 Agris, which is a DJI aircraft. And we chose that one just because it's got it has the ability to carry the weight that we need, but its propeller wash isn't huge, and propeller wash was a big sort of hurdle we had to get over to get to market. On the system itself, we've developed our own dispersal system. I'm going to shout out to Ken, who's over in Australia, who was sort of a lot of the brains behind that. So he helped us get a system in place that could disperse the powder which it carries beyond the propeller wash. And so the drone goes up on a set pre-planned path over the final approach, usually of an aerodrome, but that modifies just slightly depending on the weather of the day. So things like wind and then the location itself generates different types of fog, and you've got to kind of account for that depending on the route you fly. But it's a 10-minute flight, so super quick. The drone lands, the visibility comes well within 30 minutes of the drone landing, and each test that we've done so far, we're getting visibility for over 2 hours. So
okay, yeah, I was just about to say, like, what happens if the fog just converges into the spot? Okay, that's really good.
I should say, little caveat there, we are targeting airports where the fog's under 6 knots. So for us, you've got a slower wind there to deal with. But I do think we'll get to a stage where we can actually anticipate where it's regenerating from and focus our dispersal methods there to actually keep it clear on a windy day.
Cool. Yeah, some really cool tech behind that. That sounds really interesting. And is that all? You've got the IP and any patents and to help stop jumping in there?
Yeah. So we got a patent on our dispersal system, and then the absorbent itself is more internal know-how.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Okay. And just a note for anyone tuning in, we would love for this to be interactive. So if you've got any questions for Emily, feel free to chuck them either in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll keep an eye on those. So yeah, feel free to chuck anything on your minds that you'd love to hear from Emily about on there. In the meantime, in terms of, let's say, challenges, have you had any major setbacks? Because I know you've been doing this 5-6 years with Pyper. So I'd be curious, what kind of setbacks have happened? How did you overcome them? Anything like that.
Yeah, plenty along the way, as any good startup has. So biggest ones. So I guess the first challenge was actually getting off the ground and being able to complete a full-scale test. And for us, when we're doing those, this was before we got onto a drone in Australia. So to do it compliant to regulatory requirements here in New Zealand, we actually had to develop a system that could hang underneath a helicopter. And so to get out of the propeller wash of the helicopter, you're looking at a 100-foot line below. And then you had to get it, the dispersal system itself to fly straight. So we had to put a large tail on it. And then you had the logistical challenges of trying to chase fog with a helicopter. And so some good examples of that is, you'd predict fogs forming in Twizel. You'd have to position the helicopter team and the helicopter the night prior when there is visibility on top of the mountain itself, so that when they took off in the morning, they're above the fog and they've got visual orientation because they can see each of the different peaks of the mountains, even if there's fog below. And then we had a requirement where we couldn't fly over major assets, so that means roads, houses, those sort of things. And so quite often would take off in the morning. The fog would shift paddocks. We'd have to unload the load, drive it to the other side, get the helicopter to the other mount, ship it up to the top, take off again. By then we're into a different landowner's paddock, so you're on the phone call at 4 a.m. going, excuse me, can we test over your property? And so I just like the chase there was good fun, but it was a lot of work just to get those first few tests in and get that initial concept proven. And then, as I'm sure many others have had, COVID has thrown its own challenges for us. So we went over in March 2020, and myself and one of my team members ended up getting stuck there for 11 months. We had our pilots on one side of the border, so in Queensland, and all of our test sites and approval areas in New South Wales. So it was, whilst we're half an hour drive away, we had to comply to both regulations, which just meant, a lot of backwards and forwards and repositioning each of the pilots. And then the second time we went over for 2 weeks and got stuck for 4 months. So went and continued tests there, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the team at Hobby UAV. There are pilots over in Australia. Jackie went a lot of work in order to position her husband to fly for us, over that time. And so he missed away, several months worth of work and time with his family in order to be on call for our team for when the fog did show up. So very grateful.
Oh no, that's awesome. Cool. So you don't deal with helicopters anymore, right then?
No, thankfully. Yeah, that was just this proof of concept.
Yeah. Cool. And in terms of the drone use, what kind of research went into deciding what drone to use, and would you be looking at any point to design your own drones, your own systems, or what are you kind of thinking around that?
Yeah, good question. So when we first went to market, we just were looking for something that could carry the weight. We ended up using a Griffin Dynamics drone. Such an awesome aircraft. It has 150 maximum takeoff weight. At the time when we were flying it, it was the largest drone in Australasia. I mean, it stood up to my chest. 2-meter long propellers. It's a lot of fun to work with. But one of the things we learned there, and it took a little bit of time, was that the absorbent itself wasn't able to get shot out beyond the propeller wash because it was just too strong. So when we actually ended up colouring the absorbent and running a test, you could see it coming out and going like this and straight down to the ground. So you'd get a hole in the fog, but nothing more than that.
Oh, yeah, not much.
No, it wasn't great. So we had to go down. So now when we look for drones, we're looking for something that has a low propeller wash, still can carry 22 kgs of powder for us. And yeah, and that industry is growing really quick, so I'm sure, you know, the opportunities there are going to increase. But I have had a couple of conversations with New Zealand companies, and I would love to see this become a fully New Zealand product. So the absorbent manufactured here, the drone built here with another New Zealand company, the dispersal systems already getting set up here in New Zealand. So yeah, big need to have that offering, bring it back home.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, to have it all New Zealand made.
Yeah,
homely. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, now's the time to chuck them into the Q&A for Emily. Otherwise, in terms of what the next year, next five years, what do you think that looks like for you?
Yeah, so this investment raise we're doing now will kind of fund the next few years and hopefully get us to a position where we're sustainable from a cash position with revenue coming in. We've got our first airport starting at some point this year, which is very exciting. So there's a lot of operating procedures that we're just kind of automizing at the moment to get that all set up. We've got our regulatory approval that we're continuously progressing, and you know, really enjoying working with the team here at Civil Aviation to kind of we've broken that down, so we go from, you know, an approval in a paddock to flying at an airfield, flying at a controlled airfield, and there's that real, you know, crawl, walk, run that you work alongside there to get it up and running. But hopefully a lot of the work that we're doing here and through partnerships like Project Tawhaki, we'll be able to see a lot of the tests that we do kind of open up the pathway for other drone companies to come through.
Fine, yeah, because you're going through all the regulatory issues, which I can imagine must be a headache.
Yeah.
Those.
Yeah.
We're very. A question here. Question from Nathan. What is propeller wash and why does it matter?
Good one, Nathan. So that's just like the amount of or the force basically driven down in order to create the lift of the drone. And because our absorbent is tiny, you know, it's like dispersing. Icing sugar is probably the closest substance I could give it to. If you can't get out beyond that initial propeller wash, you know, the powder just falls straight down to the ground. And to be effective for us, we need to be dispersing it 70 meters wide whilst we're doing a forward run over the runway. So quite a wee way, and you want that that dispersal to be even as well as it falls in order to absorb as many water particles in the air to clear the fog.
Cool. And then we've got another question from anonymous attendee. How complete/active was your prototype when you started pitching for investment?
Good question. So family and friends was just an idea, but that was, I think we raised 40k, wasn't a heap. Then we got, with that 40k, we got ourselves to a point where we were testing actively in a fog chamber. So we were making artificial fog and dispersing that to show that the concept worked from a compound size. And we also had a lot of our environmental tests done at that point in time, so we could show that it was compliant worldwide and wasn't going to cause issues there. And so at that point in time, we pitched for our first angel round. We were going to raise, I think we were raising 400,000, and we shut off at 700,000 that time round. And then from there, we used that funding to do our first outdoor trials to scale it up. So we're dispersing, the very first time was climbing 50 feet of scaffolding and using a modified leaf blower to spray the powder out and show that it could clear fog. Some really good learnings there. And then onto the bottom of a helicopter. And then we did another raise to get it underneath the drone. So
cool, awesome. A question here from Zach. How have you managed the impact on the environment of the compound used for fog dispersal?
Yeah, so that was, Zach, if you look at the history of fog dispersal as a whole, there's been over 100 attempts to disperse fog. What we could see through those, a lot of the chemical-based ones, which were by far the most effective in terms of sustaining visibility long-term, they showed us that they just couldn't meet the environmental regulations at the time. So you had two issues that were showing up quite considerably. One was the corrosiveness of the chemicals. A lot of them were salt-based. And then the second was the buildup of residue. So when they turned to compounds like different variations of sands for fog dispersal, the sand would build up on the airfield itself. And so you're essentially creating your own sandpit over time. It just couldn't keep up. So for us, we had to be able to absorb a really high amount of moisture per particle so that you didn't end up with residue on the ground. But we also had to comply to all our environmental regulations. And so because there's no tests for, how safe is a fog dispersal chemical, we've ended up having to test to similar standards. So one of the first ones we did was testing to drinking water standards. Can this go in your drinking water? Is it safe? And we've met that worldwide, which is awesome. We then went through a process with a lot of our local regional environmental councils and ag research, and looked at things like toxicity in the soil, degradation rate, how it would impact flora and fauna, and from there we could see that the impact was pretty much negligible the whole way through. Our chemical degrades to a carbon source over time, and because it's such a small amount, we're talking 0.2 grams per meter squared, it degrades faster than it builds up, even if you're testing it in your airport with 100 fog days.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then another question here from Zach. Who are the target airports, regional airports versus large international ones, or any other segments in the market?
Yeah. So here in New Zealand, we were looking at initially we want this to be sort of New Zealand focused product, I guess. So we wanted to get the New Zealand airports up and running. So we've done a lot of work locally to identify what ones have the biggest disruption for local regional flights. And then we've set up a pathway to onboard those airports. At the same time, we're looking, so for this year with our we're wanting to kickstart the regulatory process overseas, and the best way to do that, because that process is, at 12 to 18 months long, is to actually do it in partnership with a potential customer. So for overseas, we're looking at really large freight hubs. Freight in itself loses a larger amount per aircraft for a disruption. The market as a whole, there's the top 5 companies collectively lose $1 billion per annum from freight. And if you look at somewhere like Memphis Airport, say, a lot of their traffic goes through there every night. You'd centralize the customer by looking at onboarding somewhere where the airport and airlines are owned by the same person, but you also kind of position yourself really well for the future, because they go into over 200 airports worldwide. So, really good alignment there.
Yeah, that is a good way to get into it a lot quickly. Awesome. Cool focus on New Zealand first, and then expanding outwards. Awesome. Okay, we've got a question here. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. Shipra, is it?
Hi, Shipra. Yes.
Hi everyone, I love Pyper Vision and team and know their struggles since 2020. They've grown quickly a lot over time. What's Emily's plan moving forward with COVID, Omicron, and additionally, how does the team manage this pressure?
Yeah, good question, Shipra. I've just kind of reached out to Nick this morning to look at all our plans going to be sufficient. But as a team, we're looking at sort of moving everyone into a bit of a roster. So you don't have the whole team working together at any one time. Hopefully that means we can keep trials going. We've got access to those rapid testing, so we can kind of implement that within our processes. And the times that the team will be coming together moving forward are going to be during trials. So, it's going to be an outdoor environment anyway, running the drone, easy to maintain, 5 meters, sort of thing. So hopefully it'll be okay. I guess the biggest challenge there is, managing, everyone's still got to have a personal life, and that's sadly going to be the most likely place where people get in at the same stage too. We're all going to have it at some point. So, faster you can move through it, the better. But hopefully we've got the whole team now, very soon qualified as drone pilots. So a lot of redundancy built in order to keep those trials going.
Awesome. And would you be looking to hire then some more with the new funding?
After the raise, most definitely, yeah. So we'll bring on a few more pilots, and someone in the finance area.
And then there's actually a question around that, is what do you look for when hiring?
I love that question. Yeah. So I guess originally when we had this mentality as a team, or the saying, I guess, that says to never leave the campsite, to always leave the campsite in a better place than you found it. And to us, it meant 2 different things. So 1, always strive for improvement. You can always improve the environment around you and contribute how you can. And then 2 was like sustainability came first. And so I guess when we're hiring, looking at that mentality around people who are willing to problem solve and take ownership over the work that they have, and feel like they can run with it. There's this interesting challenge that we've got at the moment on a cultural side where I'm seeing the switch go from everyone was very much give it a go sort of mentality before, and we needed that to get to where we are today. But now as we switch into an operational mode, it's very much safety first, and so there's going to need to be something in there, as well as we look for growing out that team and people who can take responsibility for their work and know how to judge when is it okay to give things a go, and push the boundaries from an innovation point of view. Just when do we need to lean into our operational procedures and put safety first.
Oh no, that's a really good point. That makes me curious in terms of the safety side of things. Have you encountered any issues with that? Say at airports? No. Okay.
Not yet. No.
No plans coming while your drone's up there. Awesome. Cool. Another question. What advice would you have to others working on embarking on a new startup venture?
Just, I guess, give it a go. And your biggest enemy really is yourself, as well. So if you believe in yourself and you're willing to back yourself, anything there is possible. Also lean into your network as well. I think people underestimate the power of a really good network, and I know you know this really well, Lilia, around if you can build the right people up and around you as well, they can be your biggest advocates and also open doors as well along the way. Yeah,
very true. 100%. Often it is a lot of who you know and who you've got sort of in your connections that can help you out along your journey. Awesome. Okay. If anyone else has any more questions, feel free to chuck them in. Otherwise, nothing in the chat at the moment. Cool. What's life look like for you otherwise? So we know you're living in Christchurch, you're living in a camper van at the moment.
Yeah.
What are your upcoming plans?
So getting ready for next trip overseas. Hopefully 3rd time lucky, won't get stuck in Australia.
We'll see.
Actively watching the border. I recently moved into a camper van myself just to be a little bit more flexible after getting stuck abroad so many different times, and knowing that there's going to be a lot more travel coming up in the future. This kind of seemed like the most sensible idea moving forward to give myself some form of a home base and whatnot. And really enjoying the community as well in Christchurch. So we're really lucky you've got Christchurch Aerospace has brought in a lot of other amazing aerospace companies, and there's just a phenomenal community building there, all working towards similar visions and wanting to make aerospace more accessible for other companies coming through.
Yeah, there does seem to be a lot happening down in Christchurch in the aerospace scene. That's awesome.
Exciting.
A question that's come through. What would you tell new founders not to do?
Not today. It's an interesting one. What not to do. But so I guess there's lots of learnings along the way. The one thing that kind of comes top to mind right now is I was reading a post this morning on LinkedIn around the importance of like I just can't think of the word, but you know, being authentic in your work. And I think, you know, if you can go through the founder's journey, it can be really tempting as people, you know, help you to craft your speech and tell a better story and, you know, all of that, to kind of get into this like big vision, you know, what you need, but it can also become kind of tempting to tell a bigger story than what's there. And I think the one thing I've learned is, you know, it's okay to ask for help at stages when you need it, and actually you gain a lot more respect if you come across and go, you know, I'm dealing with this challenge, this is how I'm thinking about approaching it, you know, what's your advice? And some of the, you know, best relationships we've built up with like our investors and even some of our customers has kind of been built on that foundation of, you know, not, I guess, willing to like not hiding or concealing what challenges you're working through at the time, and instead of approaching it openly.
Cool. Question here from Neil. What's been your approach to installing an advisory board, if you do have one?
Yes, awesome question, Neil. So that was one of the very first things we formed. So back when it was an idea stage, we built our first advisory board. And to start with, we went, well, who are the main stakeholders? And we're like, hey, regulator, airport, airline, you know, environmental operator. And we pulled all of the decision makers across those organizations into a board and kind of pitched our product at each stage to get feedback, and is this aligning to their needs, and, you know, is our plan viable? Which was very, very, very valuable. The one biggest learning out of that, we learned very quickly, is, you know, go to these meetings with sort of the exec level across each of those places. I'll come home, have a chat with mum over the dining room table, and she'd go, oh, just, it doesn't work like that, you know, like that might be the rule for air traffic control, but often we'll have to move to this process or this process on this given day because of these factors. And so we actually ended up building the advisory board out again, and so we had both the decision makers but also the people on the ground for each of that, and that mix has been just absolutely beautiful for kind of helping guide the company, especially from like a technical perspective.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kind of getting the people that can have the influence at the same time as giving you advice. Really cool. A question from me in terms of pricing model. How are you looking to do that? Is it subscription for the airports, or is it per fog day? What does that look like, and how have you figured that out?
Yeah, so model wise, we're going for a annual subscription fee. The reason we're doing it is I guess our end customer really is the airline, because they lose the most on a fog day. Airports can either make money or lose money depending on you know, whether you're sitting there buying more coffees and parking for longer at the aerodrome or not. So you know, the incentive is definitely heavy on the airline side. By setting an annual pricing fee, like our costs are, year one, we've got more costs from a regulatory and equipment side, but then after there, it kind of stables out, and our biggest cost becomes our operators, so supplying the team to be on site each day, and then also the refills. If we do a subscription cost, it means that the airport can build it into their aeronautical fees. So airports run their pricing on a 3-year timeline, typically here in New Zealand. And so they'll go, we want to do X work on the runway, you need to maintain all our gates, the airport airlines need access to the kiosk machines, so forth. Each of those will be a line item, and our system's just going to be a line item on there, and then that amount will be divided by passengers to get to your, you know, $2.50 per passenger fee that they charge out, which is really handy. So we're going in there. On the price point side, that's a little bit more interesting, because for us, the two major drivers behind how much an airline loses at the airport is both the number of passengers and the fog days. And we're wanting to move into a little bit more of a value-based pricing model. So, letting an airline generate a decent return on investment, whilst also, not putting our price so high that we close off the ability to support regional airports. So we're looking at a 4-tiered program at the moment where, you've got a basic kit. So one kit, we can clear one runway, you've got one operator sort of thing for a small regional airport. Look somewhere like San Francisco, we'll give you the redundancies, so you've got maintenance on call, can get to you within an hour. We can clear all your runways at the same time. You've got a full team on board. So if someone's sick, you're not missing a fog day sort of thing. And maybe scaling it that way.
Oh, cool. Okay, no, that's awesome to hear. But in terms of the pricing model. Cool. Okay. Well, if anyone has any more questions, we'll give you just a couple more minutes to chuck those in there. I saw a few comments in the chat from Graham and another one just popped in. Compliments to you.
Thank you. Just worked out how to open those up.
Yeah. So you can't see them at the moment, or?
No, yeah, just worked out how to view the comments. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, it's always awesome having feedback from the community, and yeah. Cool. Well, in that case, I think we might wrap up then. Any final words from you in terms of advice for those listening?
Not so much advice, just a thank you, Lilia. Thank you very much for the chance to talk. It's really cool to see you in this position too. I've enjoyed working with Kiwi Landing Pad and now Territory 3 since we started. So
true.
Thank you very much for the support
as well. And always great watching your journey, and hopefully we can catch up again in person maybe when you come back from Aussie in a few months, I guess.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Lilia.
Awesome. Thanks so much for everyone for tuning in. We will be recording, so this has been recorded and I will be checking it up on YouTube website. We've even started a Spotify podcast, so you can listen to the webinars on podcasts on the go now, which is really cool.
Awesome.
And I'll check a post up on LinkedIn as well once these are all uploaded. But otherwise, thanks so much to the community and for Emily for sharing her story and giving us some insight into what she's up to.
Awesome. Thanks, Lilia. Thanks everyone for dialing in.
Awesome. Catch you guys on the next one.